Hey everybody, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Erin.
I'm Dr. Kristen.
And welcome to January 2021. Y'all, we made it. 2021 feels a hell of a lot like 2020 still, but what we are doing is continuing our sometimes nationally dictated, sometimes randomly selected months of themes. And this month we are doing Immigrant Awareness Month, which is one of our made up themes, even though I found out that June is technically Immigrant and Refugee Awareness Month. We wanted to spend this month exploring stories about folks who migrate for lots of reasons. So we're going to try and hit lots of different parts of the world and talk about different stories of refugees, immigrants, undocumented folks, you name it. So we're launching off that story with a wonderful 2019 documentary on HBO called Liberty, Mother of Exiles. We will then be jumping to Cambodia and hearing about the Khmer Rouge in First They Killed My Father. We will look at Syrian refugee children across Europe with Born in Syria. And then we're going to finish with what is one of the top 10 list always of films about immigrants, The Namesake, which is a 2006 Cal Penn movie, which is a lot about immigration and assimilation of Indian immigrants. So that should be slightly, maybe a little bit happier than Syrian refugee children or the Khmer Rouge, but we don't know yet. So starting with Liberty, Mother of Exiles, it's a 2019 documentary on HBO that tells the story of the Statue of Liberty. And that may seem simple, but it's actually very, very complicated. And it's an 1.5 hour long documentary, executive produced by Diane von Furstenberg.
Of the wrap dress.
Fashion icon that she is, who was responsible for fundraising for the new museum that is getting built throughout the documentary. But the documentary, in short, explores not only how the Statue of Liberty came to be from its conception and design and construction and all of that, but all of the human lives that intersect with it, from those people that created it to the way immigrants to the country and people around the world who see it as this symbol feel about it, to the people who live on the island, who run the ferries, who make the statues in a Romanian run shop in Brooklyn. Like, it was a fantastic tour of all of the humans that are involved in telling this story. So we both really got a lot out of it. But we're going to start, before we get into our thoughts and feelings, of which we have many, we're going to start by reading the poem that is at the base of the statue. Yes, you've been, I haven't been. From the Emma Lazarus poem that, as we find out in the documentary, was written as a part of this huge marketing campaign to fundraise for the pedestal once the statue got there and there was no money for a pedestal, which is fascinating and hilarious and very American. And Bertoldi just wrapped up with this giant statue. He was like, y'all, where am I going to put it? But the Emma Lazarus poem has been often quoted throughout history since it has been included with this story. So we're going to start by reading it because it's very important, and then we'll dive into our thoughts.
It's called The New Colossus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed, sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, the Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that Twin Cities fame. Keep ancient lands, you storied pomp, cries she, with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to break free. The wretched refuge of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
Whew. It's a wonderful piece of writing and says a lot about, I think, the aspirations of our great country that we often talk about we have not quite reached, or sometimes we reach and then step back from. But yes, very, very powerful, beautiful poem, beautifully well read, Dr. Kristen. We discovered in our offline chats that we both have very different experiences of the Statue of Liberty. So I think that's an interesting way to kind of tell what we thought about it. I have never been to Liberty Island or Ellis Island, and I've been to New York several times, mostly with Dr. Kristen, but have seen the statue really only once on the Staten Island ferry in the year of our Lord 2000, but did not travel to it because I didn't have the money. But Dr. Kristen, growing up in very close proximity to New York, physically and emotionally, has had many more experiences. So for me, watching this documentary, I'm fascinated by the development of this symbol. But until I watched this documentary, it was really just a symbol to me. And I feel like it had been kind of overproduced and over commodified. You see it everywhere, it's on everything. It kind of, the more we repeat symbols, they can sometimes lose their meaning. I think I would feel very differently going now than I would have if I had gone in 2000 as a 17-year-old. But so I'm looking forward post-apocalypse to going back with Dr. Kristen so we can experience this together. But you had a very different relationship with New York and specifically with the Statue of Liberty. So
yeah,
tell us your story.
I am the only granddaughter on both sides of my family, which led to some really special experiences, especially with my maternal grandmother, who spent a lot of time making sure I understood, and my aunt, who's my godmother, making sure what it meant to be a Nielsen woman, that I understood that I was a child of immigrants, and that were very self-made once they got here, and to kind of always understand what was going on. And that side of the family is the Danish side of the family that I've talked about before. And although both of my branches of the family came through New York at various times, as far as we know, they all came through, all the various branches all came through Ellis Island, even just by family lore. If we can't find
my family came
signature
through Baltimore.
Yeah, that would have made sense with Irish immigrants. So mine came from Scotland. Mine were Glasgow and Copenhagen, and those all went to Ellis Island. So so I've seen two great-grandparents' signatures, and the rest are family lore, and it's just kind of understood that they came through. Mm-hmm. It's possible that one of the spellings of our names was changed at one point, and that we were some of the people that got that happen to us, etc. So I think the first time I went to the statue, I was 5, maybe 4. I was young. There's definitely young pictures of me standing. I was born in 1983. So I definitely went before there were metal detectors. And there's a picture of, I'm going to say 7-year-old me standing next to the face. And the way it used to work, that it now no longer works, is that the pedestal was the museum. So you'd rock up on the ferry and you'd go stand in line. And my family is allergic to lines, so we were always very strategic about when we got there. And we always packed snacks. That was also a big thing too, because we refused to pay concession prices. This is a big part of our brand.
Oh my God, I cannot imagine how
Island. I had like a thing. I was like, excuse me, I have to buy your good humor ice cream packs. Like, excuse me. We're big packers. So and then you'd go in, and as you walk in the pedestal, it's the original torch. Because the torch, as in the documentary we learned, for people who don't know, was removed in 1986 because it just couldn't quite withstand the light anymore. And also they wanted an electric lamp because the lamp was gas powered. So
like a giant light bulb? Cool.
So they put in a giant, they made it much more illuminatable, and they added some lights to the crown and some things like that in 1986. So the original torch, which is the like stained glass one, was right as you walked in. And then you met Bartoli, and you started, like, you got to see some of the original casts. They've had to replace some of the copper, like on her feet and on her face. And so you can touch them, which is nuts. And I understood really young, like exactly how thin 2 pennies was.
Yeah, like I had no idea she was that thin.
And there's a great exhibit explaining how she can move with the wind and the way they did the rivets and like where they placed them and how that was okay. And I remember a special exhibit at one point that had a bunch of Paris ladies' skirts all lined up that he used to design how the fabric would drape.
Wow.
And like he poured concrete over one at one point to try to like make sure he understood the draping. I don't know, 10 times I've been to the Statue of Liberty in my life. And then for a long time when I was young, Ellis Island wasn't open. And so, because they were renovating it, which somebody needs to do a documentary on that, because the way that we let Ellis Island almost go to complete ruin is an embarrassment. Absolute embarrassment. So then we started going to Ellis Island, and now you do both. There are combo tickets. They're on the same ferry. They're very next to each other. Ellis Island is significantly more emotional for me than the statue experience. I will say that the statue is more emotional for me than the experience of going to it, because at the experience of going to it, I get annoyed by all the people that I don't think understand how important it is, and I get very elitist, and the worst parts of me come out in my brain. It's a little bit like when I went to go see the Mona Lisa and just no one was looking at it. They were just taking 1,000 selfies, and I was like, just appreciate what's happening in front of you. And
the Mona Lisa is a trip, and it's like, yeah, we won't get started on that, but yeah.
So that's a little bit like the going to the statue experience now as a senior citizen of the planet. The last time I went was 2011. So I haven't seen the new museum. We will go see it after these times. We actually planned on seeing it this past summer. That was one of our adventures planned that got postponed. Because there's right by our favorite Irish pub, you can get the ferry. So we were going to do a whole immigrant thing. The Irish Famine Museum is right down there. We were going to do a whole thing. So we'll do the whole thing in the future. It's been very important to me for most of my life that a fragile, very easily breakable woman is the symbol of fortitude and strength for the nation. That point was drawn to me by all of my aunts and my mother and my grandmothers very early. I have a really strong relationship with as my imagination of what it must felt like after months and months of vomiting on those ships, what it must have felt like to see that thing for the first time. There's no other immigrant harbor in the United States that has a symbol like that. And it's I have a real love of taking people to New York. And so the minute on the train that you can see the statue for the first time, it's always really fun to hear people go, "Oh my God, it's a statue."
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to make fun of them. Like, it is really it's there. It's the Statue of Liberty. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
And I mean, now it's annoying to go to because of all the security. I can't lie. You have to go through so many metal detectors. It's so many things of my childhood where you could just rock up and hang out. Now with all the security, it's annoying. But it's not worth it, if that makes sense. So to hear a couple things, like I still learned a lot. I was very privileged to have gone to the museum so many times and be such a nerd that like I read child directed biographies of Bertolli when I was growing up and all of that. But so I knew a lot about him.
Similarly to me reading like childhood biographies of Bessemer or Kit Carson the Explorer. So
I definitely read about French architects evidently. So cool. But I remember the face being a prostitute. Like I remember always knowing.
Oh wow, yeah.
So, and that was one of the ways that he wanted to talk about the strength and endurance of women, is that we always make money and we always survive whether we're allowed to or not. And so he put the face of a prostitute on the international perception of liberty.
He was such a feminist. God love him.
So cool.
Yeah.
But one things I did learn that I absolutely loved, beyond the fact that Diane von Furstenberg was a big part of this, which I did not know.
I did not know.
I knew that there was a fundraising campaign for the pedestal because it's in the old museum. Yeah. I did not connect that it was done by Joseph Pulitzer, which is amazing because I normally hate him because he is the villain of Newsies.
I was about to say, for those of you that don't know how much Dr. Kristen and I love the musical Newsies, both the original film starring Christian Bale and the Broadway the relaunch. which we love. Yeah, Pulitzer is the evil dude who's forcing all these children into labor and like trying
Not
to own
paying them and like making them eat newspaper.
trying to like own the world. And all of a sudden they were like, yeah, man, this upstart publisher, Joseph Pulitzer, decided, what
You're the first Indiegogo campaign in American history.
And it was something like that. The thing that stopped me was that he took out, an op-ed in his own paper, and he said like, this statue was not built by millionaires in France for millionaires in America. And I was like, I'm sorry, Joseph Pulitzer? I'm sorry.
This is a bit before he started being a millionaire.
This is before he becomes one of the
magnates. I mean, he's who we call the Pulitzer Prize after. Like that name is why it sounds familiar, folks, if you don't know. So.
But anyway, I did not know that about Joseph Pulitzer. I enjoyed learning that he was an evolution.
As so many of us are. So women were not allowed to the opening event. And so it's always been a symbol of protest, the Statue of Liberty has been, which is, to quote my favorite movie, American President, if you truly love the United States, the symbol cannot just be a flag. It has to be your citizens burning the flag in protest. Uh-huh. So if you truly love liberty, your symbol cannot just be the Statue of Liberty. It has to be protests regarding using the Statue of Liberty as symbol. Mm-hmm. So back in 1886,
y'all,
suffragettes protesting that they weren't allowed to be there, got rented boats and hung out in the harbor with bullhorns. Just circling the island.
Around the island, screaming suffrage demands. It's the best thing I've heard all day.
Oh my God, I loved it so much. And it was this total like throwaway moment too. Like, oh, by the way, this thing opened with saltiness. I was like,
yes, it did. But like, to me, like, it was such a great moment. And like, we spent so much, if those of you watching this don't know, you can find it on our YouTube channel. We spent a lot of time last year talking about suffrage because it was the centenary of the 19th Amendment. But it was a throwaway moment in the documentary. But then right after it, they were like, I mean, think about it. You've got this giant, colossal woman who is the symbol of liberty in a country where women didn't have liberty.
Didn't legally exist.
And so, for me, it was so fascinating and intellectual in that exercise because we spoke recently about the treatment of women in Ireland and specifically mother and baby homes, but largely, the way Ireland is represented as a woman, and women have been so historically oppressed by the Irish state, very similarly around the world. So it was really powerful to make that connection. And I think sometimes you can take, unless you're Dr. Kristen and get told by the fabulous women in your family, I think we can take for granted that it is a woman sometimes.
Yeah.
And the power of what that represented in 1886, but what it continues to represent. And like they obviously genderize her, and we talk about her all the time, but I think we don't spend enough time talking about the fact that it's a massive statue to a woman, especially since public statues and public art are almost entirely male dominated in terms of the actual representations of humans from history. So for me, I thought it seemed like a throwaway moment, but I actually had to pause the documentary because I was like, that is some real heavy lifting, and I love it.
Another small detail I loved is that we saw on screen from where every single person who spoke their family emigrated from, which was great.
Massive.
A really, really great reminder that there are definitely indigenous people to these lands, and none of them are us generally who think of us as ourselves as Native Americans in the way that we talk about it. Yeah. And a really, really great reminder that everybody has an immigrant story, except for a small but mighty portion of our current population.
Yeah.
And we're very, very grateful for that. And I look forward to taking you guys with us to Ellis Island and Liberty Island someday. Once we can start traveling again, we've worked on our tech a little bit, and we are going to be doing a lot more live things and taking you with us. So I look forward that you guys can see this place through our eyes once we get back to leaving our houses.
Yeah, not filming in our home offices. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the way they told the story through all of the humans that see it and what it can mean is like the last thing I would like to say, like what it can mean to different people, and what it symbolizes specifically to a lot of immigrants. But then its use as this symbol and as a political symbol. And they tell the story of the anonymous activist who draped a refugee's welcome sign on the pedestal in 2017 after the United States government had announced a ban on Muslim immigrants to the United States. And like, I loved that in that way they showed how living it is. Like, artifacts are living. They continue to change in meaning as we change as a society, and they constantly serve this purpose. They are not fixed. They are not frozen. And she's very active. And I love how they connected how active her pose is when they were talking about the physical construction with how active she is as a symbol and continues to be. And I thought it was a really important place to end on, because nothing is finished. Certainly not this project of liberty we are sometimes aspiring to on these shores, and others. But yeah, I think for the art historian in me, anybody who wants to spend some time talking about how symbols evolve, I am here for it.
And boy, is she.
Yeah.
We really hope that you take an hour and a half and watch this thing. We think it's really fascinating and a really lovely exploration of immigration from a symbolic and pragmatic perspective at the same time, and kind of what it looks like. And we will, like we said, we're going to go around the world. We're going to head west from New York, exceptionally west, or exceptionally east, depending on which direction you
go.
Every time I have gone to that part of the world, I've flown through LA or California.
Right, yeah, depends. Either way, we're going to Cambodia.
Either way, we're heading to Cambodia next. And Cambodian refugees would not have seen the statue as they came to California and other places. So it'll be really fascinating to hear if they address any kind of symbol of what America was once they arrived. So here we go.
That's what we've got for our first installation of our Made Up Immigrant Awareness Month. We'll see you guys next week for First They Killed My Father. Take care.